Okay, so here we go. So we are doing a House Q&A. This is for House seat 114. We are here with candidate Brad Jayne. We did reach out to incumbent Lynn Bennett, who did not respond, and we have met with candidate Ed Sutton on a separate Q&A. So we're going to be talking with House 114 candidate Brad Jayne today. And Brad, thank you first of all so much for being willing to speak to us about public education. One of our goals with SC for Ed is to get the right candidates into office, and we do that by educating our community on what the candidates will stand for and fight for, if elected or when elected, if we're staying positive. So if you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself, speak a little bit about your platform, your concerns, why you're running for the seat, anything you want to share with our community before we get started on the questions.
Sure, absolutely. I appreciate it. And thank you for having me. I am Brad Jayne. I'm running as an independent for State House District 114. I've always been very independent politically and otherwise, and I'm running with the nonpartisan, non-ideological South Carolina Alliance Party. I'm from a military family, so we moved around a lot, including several stints here in the Charleston area. I actually did a year at Flowertown Elementary in Newington and Somerville, and I graduated from Wando High School. After college in Chapel Hill, I came back to Charleston, and this had become my home over the years. It's a place that really inspires me in all ways, and I wanted to really focus on building it up as a community and its industries, and I've been doing that for the past 20 years or so, and my plan to work and serve in the State House is just an extension of that. My main day job is I'm a producer and an independent contractor. I lead projects for companies like Volvo, Dominion Energy, Nexton, Darkness to Light, SCPRT, a bunch of others. I've also started and oversee career programs with Trident Tech in the state of South Carolina. I've been doing that for about 10 years. Those have been recognized for their innovation and effectiveness. I'm proud of those, as is everyone involved. I've learned a lot there, and I think they also sum up my approach to problem solving and getting things done, including when it comes to education. Those programs are very pragmatic. They're based on apprenticeship and real-world training, understanding that everyone learns differently, and the applied learning process, which is really a lot of what we do, can be really effective, especially transitioning from school to career. I've been most successful building programs like that in projects by being independent, by bringing people together toward a common goal and being unencumbered by ideology and small thinking, having all concepts and tools at our disposal to build solutions. This is exactly how I've always approached service and how I want to do so in the State House. And clearly there's no bigger element we need to focus that sort of thinking and energy on than education. My wife is a public school teacher. Our 3 daughters are in low country public schools. And I've also started a media arts education program for schools across the state, where we have an annual contest. I speak to schools, mentor students, and lead teacher training on media arts. It's been a great experience for me, and it's safe to say I've learned a ton. I think most of us understand the value of public education pragmatically, which I think is where we can even build more buy-in. It's a major economic driver, and it's the way we're going to shrink the opportunity gap, or one of the main ways we're going to do that, which results in a stronger state. So we come together and say that. And one of the things I'd like to see happen is a constitutional amendment that says we as a state will provide high quality education instead of the minimally adequate decree we have now. It's something that's been in the works in the State House, and I want to go up there and push it through. I also think we need to set up the system to treat teachers and administrators like the professionals they are, with better pay and support from the top down, including more freedom to do their jobs in a way that works best for their classrooms. That's how I work best. That's how I think most people work best. They're the experts. They know what works best for them, and for their specific students, and we need to listen to them. And I also, one of the things I like to do is seek out innovation. I think we can do that to make public schools stronger. Concepts that are proven to work and have long-term benefit, like early literacy and extended learning. So that's a lot. That's a start. I'm sure we'll get into more as we go along, but that sums up my approach.
Okay, great. So we're going to just jump right into the questions. The first one is, what is your opinion of the state of public education in South Carolina today?
Well, it is complex. I think there are fundamental things that have to be addressed, like teacher pay. I know it's not in the current education bill, but Jay Lucas has pledged a 5-year plan to raise teacher pay above the national average. no matter what you feel about him or or why that's not in the current bill. I think it's a wise way to do it, and I think we can do that, and I think we can hold them to that. Small class sizes, less standardized testing, which goes in more customization model we all want. I think those are things we have to address. But as a broader point, and this is really the question, the answer to your question, I think the big issue we have is a lack of equity in public education. There's a lot of great schools in the state and in the low country. There are a lot that aren't. That's not and that's where students get left behind on a very basic day-to-day level. That's not the fault of the administrators or students or teachers at those schools. I think a lot of it is circumstances. So we step back and identify what those circumstances are and what those needs are, and see this as an opportunity to fix it. There are a lot of schools that thrive. Let those schools thrive. Let them be largely left alone with of course, the measured oversight, and then focus constructively on schools that aren't, especially those in challenged communities or rural communities, and be led by those educators and parents. Work with them in a thoughtful way on how to make those schools better. Look for innovation. Again, programs that are proven to work, like early literacy, pre-K, parent liaisons, longevity bonuses for teachers, sister schools. Apply those to those schools. Funding is always going to be an issue. I think we can set up a program where those would be grant funding and also federal Title I funding, but work with those teachers and administrators and parents to come up with methods that will help them. That seems like that's part of the challenge. How can we expect teachers and administrators in more challenged schools to find better ways and figure out how to implement them for their schools on top of the day-to-day job of teaching and running a school like that? I think we can provide that service almost on a consultant level, where we work with them to identify the needs and solutions, probably by enhancing or rethinking the Office of School Transformation, finding the programs that work, which a lot of schools in South Carolina and in the Low Country are building, and create a mechanism for smooth introduction of the ones teachers and administrators believe will help them. And I think another key thing we need to address as an overall current state of public education is education funding reform. The current formula is not weighted properly. I don't think it's not weighted smartly. Counties that don't have the extra funding available are getting less funding overall. I think we can fix that formula. Plenty of folks in the General Assembly seem to recognize that and know it's needed, and I'd like to go up there and help do that. So that sums it up.
Okay. Yeah. If elected, what would be the first step you would take to improve public education? First and foremost, you get to the House building and you say, number one, I'm going to do this.
I only get one.
It would be the first.
I know. One step at a time. Well, yeah. Okay. So, all right. It's, as we know and have said, it's complex, expensive. It's a challenging issue, public education. I think so. Let's start big picture. I don't think it's going to work if we don't have full buy-in. So we should state it clearly and all agree as a state that quality public education for all students is a high value proposition. And that's that constitutional amendment. And then we all have this guiding principle that understands how important it is, again, for all the economic reasons, all the pragmatic reasons, and let us come together with that idea in mind and put it in, very official writing as a mandate in the Constitution. And then again, this becomes the guiding principle for everything else, including teacher pay and funding reform. So that's what I would want to start with.
Okay. If elected, what would you do to address the funding of South Carolina or public education? You touched on it a little bit, but here's an opportunity to sort of dig a little deeper.
Sure. And I think a lot of that also raises questions about how we do state funding, but let's focus in on the practicality of it first. I mean, I'm very fiscally conservative. We're a fiscally conservative state. I think that's smart. I'm all about cost efficiency. The price tag for any component of government is always on the forefront of mind. We have to be able to pay for things. As we know, that's not always done. You can look at what happened with SCANA and Santee Cooper as an example of awful spending. Let's get back on the rails. We also have COVID, of course, which is totally is sucking away our surplus. Those are realities, but I think one of the key things is thinking about how we prioritize our spending. It should be smart spending, but let's prioritize our spending. And this is why the quality education mandate is so important. Why we have to come together and recognize the long-term benefits and immense value of public education are worth paying for. So basically, decide that that is going to be one of our priorities, and pay for it smartly. Paying for things that don't work over and over is not a smart use of spending, and good ideas don't cost a lot. And listening to people who know what they're talking about, like teachers, doesn't cost a lot, and it can save us money on the long run. So we work with teachers to identify what will help them on the front end, find ways to do it, and pay for those. And again, the education funding formula reform. I mean, I think that's a big part of what we're talking about. And that just creates more fairness. It creates better schools, and it's a better use of state funds.
Okay. In your opinion, what would a successful accountability system for education in South Carolina look like? And when I ask that question, I'm talking about, like, for example, right now we have the South Carolina report card that is part of the federal ESSA mandate that really sort of heavily focuses on high stakes testing.
Right.
Which is a big, driver in all of this. But in order for you to deem a school successful, what does that accountability look like? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. Yeah. And I guess that goes into teacher accountability too, a bit, I would assume. Yeah. And so this is something I've tried to sort of absorb from my wife and other teacher friends in terms of what they think works best. I think how much weight we put on the state standardized testing right now is ill-suited. I think I understand it's some degree multifaceted. It should be even more so, where standardized testing is less of the major component. Teachers tell me we should use more adaptive tests. It's a better reflection of where students might be. Some kids don't test as well or might be having a hard day. I guess MAPS testing is an example of that. When it comes to K-8, it's more adaptive to the students. You get immediate results. It's more accurate to what their true levels are. If that's what I've heard from teachers, but if others disagree, like yourself, my ears are wide open, and I'm here to learn for real. So, and state standardized testing, I guess, is given once a year. It seems like it makes more sense to give them some form of an adaptive testing 2 to 3 times a year. So I guess something like that is better than the current standard testing system, which doesn't reflect as accurately. So that's one start. Thinking about a smarter test that gets the data that we want, which is a more accurate reflection of where students and schools are. And then I obviously combine that with some sort of classroom or school metric. And I think we could find something better than just pass-fail. I think pass-fail just has a lot of inherent issues. I don't know what that is yet, but I'd like to figure that out with the aid of folks like you. But I would also say there should be accountability from both ends. I mean, we should get an idea from teachers on the performance of their administrators and school boards. And I think you could do that through simple surveys. They really are the ones that know best about how it's working. School boards, I think, is an interesting proposition. And I mean, there's standards, ethical standards and such that can be put in place for school boards. I know that was supposed to be in this current education bill. So I think we have to remember that there's a lot of factors that go into it, and we need to sort of divide up fairly the accountability.
Great. Well, those are the 4 questions that we have. Is there anything else, that you would like to share with our community? Anything we haven't touched on that you think is important?
One thing I'm learning a lot about, and I don't think maybe this does get talked about enough, I just don't hear it, but early child literacy. Years 3 and 4, there's a lot of schools that are, or some schools are doing that, and that's very effective, but also years 0 to 3. There are pilot programs and studies that have been done in the state, and what they tell us clearly is that the difference that early literacy makes in the lives of those kids, they get into the school system and then into the workforce, is huge, and it improves the whole system. Kids who are exposed to language and reading early on, as in from the get-go, are better prepared when they get into K-12. That lets teachers focus on doing their jobs of advancing the whole class and not having to help students catch up. That's really not supposed to be their job. It just makes their job that much harder. So it works. It's a game changer. Now we figure out how to implement it in a broad way for the state, which I don't think is going to be easy, but I think it's so that's just something that I'm trying to keep up with in terms of the conversation and figuring out how to use that tool. And then I would just, if anybody has any thoughts on anything that we're talking about public education, they can reach out to me at brad@bradforsc.com. And also, our campaign website is bradforsc.com if they want to get more information about our platform and our campaign.
Fantastic. Well, Brad, thank you so much for taking the time to answer these questions. We really appreciate the information and appreciate your time.
No, I appreciate you. It's been great.
So I'm going to go ahead and hit stop recording.